It was supposed to be the celebration of my life's work. My son, my only child, stood before a room full of our friends and colleagues, raising a glass of champagne in my honor. But as I lifted my own glass to my lips, I saw our family lawyer across the room, his face pale with panic. He caught my eye and, with a small, frantic shake of his head, mouthed the word, "No." "Dwi." What he showed me on his phone just moments later, a single devastating image, made me regret the day I ever brought that boy into this world. If you enjoy this story, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I wish you all a peaceful listening. The last thing I packed for Julian was a small linen-bound book of Gerard's favorite poems. It was a foolish, sentimental gesture, I know. A 45-year-old man on his way to the Maldives probably wouldn't have much time for poetry. But the book's worn leather cover felt like a tangible piece of his father, and I suppose I wanted him to carry that with him. I tucked it between a stack of neatly folded linen shirts and a bottle of ridiculously expensive sunscreen I'd bought for him, the kind that smelled of coconuts and sand. The care package sat on the polished mahogany of the hall table, a collection of small comforts for a long journey. One for Julian, one for my sister, Eleanor, and one for Gerard's brother, Henry, and his wife, Clara. My whole family whisked away to paradise on Julian's dime. He had announced it at Sunday dinner 2 weeks prior, his voice booming with a kind of magnanimous pride that made my heart swell. "It's time we celebrated this family," he'd said, his hand resting on the shoulder of his executive assistant, Kendra, who had been joining us for dinners more and more often. No work, no stress, just sun, sand, and each other, to honor Mom and Dad and everything they built. Everyone had been ecstatic. My sister had wept with joy. Henry had clapped Julian on the back, calling him a true Devereaux. I had simply watched my son, the spitting image of his father, but with a softer line around his mouth, and felt a wave of profound gratitude. He was a good man. He was taking care of everyone. When he'd asked me to come along, I'd smiled and squeezed his hand. My traveling days were behind me, I told him. The gardens here in Charlotte needed me, and besides, someone had to hold down the fort. The truth was, this house was the fort. It was my quiet sanctuary, every corner filled with 35 years of a good marriage. Gerard's presence was still here, woven into the worn threads of the armchair in his study, in the faint, clean scent of lavender that still clung to his desk drawers. To leave it, even for paradise, felt like a betrayal. Julian hadn't pushed. He understood. Or so I believed. The morning they left, the house had been a whirlwind of frantic energy, of suitcases banging against door frames and last-minute shouts for misplaced passports. I stood on the porch, waving as the black car service pulled away from the curb, a neat little caravan of my family, heading off to an adventure. And then, silence. A profound, echoing quiet that settled over the house like a soft blanket. For the first few days, I savored it. The silence wasn't empty. It was peaceful. I moved through my days with an unhurried grace I hadn't realized I'd lost. I spent mornings in the garden, my hands in the rich North Carolina soil, tending to the roses Gerard had planted for our 25th anniversary. I drank my coffee on the sun porch, listening to the birds and reading the paper from front to back. In the evenings, I'd put on a record, Ella Fitzgerald usually, and pour myself a single small glass of sherry, feeling not lonely, but content in my solitude. The house was breathing with me. I felt close to Gerard in those quiet moments, as if he were just in the next room, about to walk in and ask me about my day. On the fourth day, a Thursday, I decided to tend to the plants in his study. The room was my favorite, all dark wood and the scent of old books and lavender. Gerard had always kept little sachets of it in his desk drawers, a habit he'd picked up from his grandmother. He said it cleared the mind. The air in the study was thick with it, a scent I associated with his calm, his integrity. I ran my fingers along the spines of his law books, then picked up the small brass watering can. After watering the big fiddle-leaf fig in the corner, I sat down at his desk. The leather of the chair sighed under my weight. It had been some time since I'd logged into the Devereaux Transit Solutions server from home, But I managed our small charitable fund, and I wanted to check on the quarterly disbursements. It was a simple task. I typed in my password, Gerard's initials, and the year we were married, and the familiar directory appeared on the screen. I navigated to the philanthropy folder, my fingers moving with muscle memory. Everything looked to be in order. The donations to the literacy program and the youth center had gone through. A small smile touched my lips. This was the part of the business that had always been my passion, the part Gerard had entrusted entirely to me. As I was about to log out, my cursor drifted. I saw a subdirectory I didn't recognize, nestled among the familiar folders for operations, finance, and HR. It was labeled simply DTS Future. Curiosity, nothing more, made me click on it. A password prompt appeared. That was odd. All major corporate planning folders were open to the board, and I was still the majority shareholder and a board member. I frowned, a little prickle of annoyance. Julian was always implementing new security protocols, convinced that corporate espionage was lurking around every corner. I tried a few simple passwords, the company's founding date, Julian's birthday. Nothing. Shaking my head with a small sigh, I decided it was a matter for another day. It was probably just some tedious IT modernization plan. I was about to close the window when a small notification slid into the top right corner of my screen. It was from a social media platform I rarely used, a place for distant relatives to share pictures of their grandchildren and vacation sunsets. My cousin's daughter, a young woman I hadn't seen in a decade, had tagged me in a photo. I clicked on it, an idle, thoughtless motion. The image that loaded filled the entire screen, and for a long moment, my mind refused to process what my eyes were seeing. It was a beach. Sand so white it hurt to look at, and water a shade of impossible turquoise. And standing there, under a floral archway, were Julian and Kendra, my son, in a crisp white linen suit, a euphoric, almost giddy smile on his face, and Kendra, his executive assistant, in a long, flowing white dress, a veil pinned in her elaborate hair. They were holding hands. Behind them, a tasteful wooden sign was staked in the sand. Hand-painted white letters on the dark wood spelled out a cheerful, damning message. Congratulations, Julian and Kendra. The air left my lungs in a single, silent gasp. My hand flew to my mouth, my knuckles pressing hard against my lips. It felt as if the floor had dropped out from under me, leaving me suspended in a cold, airless void. My gaze scanned the background of the photo, hungry for a familiar face, for some context that would make it all make sense. And I found them. My sister, Eleanor, beaming, a tropical flower tucked behind her ear. Gerard's brother, Henry, and his wife Clara, raising champagne flutes. Distant cousins, family friends, everyone. Everyone was there, dressed in their resort best, smiling for the camera. My entire family. My mind raced, a frantic, panicked scramble to connect the dots. The family trip. The all-expenses-paid generosity. His insistence that it was to honor the family. It wasn't a vacation. It was a destination wedding. And I was the only one who hadn't been invited. I was the only one who didn't know. This meticulously planned trip, this grand gesture of familial love, was a lie. It was a carefully constructed deception designed for one purpose: to get every single person in our lives who mattered out of the country, far away from me, so my son could marry a woman he had been hiding in plain sight, without his mother there to witness it. My hand, still pressed against my mouth, began to tremble. I clicked the mouse again, closing the photo, then opened it once more, as if a second look might rearrange the pixels into something sensible, something sane. But the image was stubborn. It was the truth. The turquoise water, the white sand, my smiling family, and my son, the groom, standing beside his bride. A sound, a low, wounded thing, escaped my throat. The room, which moments before had been a comforting sanctuary, suddenly felt like a tomb. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was suffocating. Every happy memory I had of my son seemed to rise up and mock me. Julian at his college graduation, his arms slung around my shoulders. Julian, as a little boy, bringing me a fistful of dandelions from the garden. Julian, just 2 weeks ago, at Sunday dinner, his eyes so earnest as he spoke of honoring the family. Some of your ways are, well, they're old-fashioned, Mom. His voice, from a conversation a few months back, echoed in my ears. He'd been talking about the company's accounting software, but his tone had been dismissive, patronizing. I'd brushed it off as the impatience of youth. "Oh, I'm just helping Julian out, Mrs. Devereaux. He's a genius, but so busy." Kendra's voice, sweet as honey, from the countless times I'd asked what exactly her role as his assistant entailed. Always smiling, always deferential. A ghost at our family table. The pieces didn't just click into place. They slammed together with the force of a car crash. The constant talk of modernization. The subtle pressure to step back, to enjoy my retirement, to let him handle things. The way he'd started including Kendra in high-level meetings, introducing her as his right hand. It hadn't been ambition, it had been a campaign. A long, slow, patient siege against me, and I had been too blind, too trusting, to see the cannons being rolled into place. The first, hot tears of shock and grief pricked my eyes, but I blinked them back with a fury that startled me. Crying felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. A phone call felt like a surrender. To scream down the line at him, to demand an explanation, would be to give him the satisfaction of my pain. It would be playing my part in their script, the hysterical, outdated old woman, overwrought and emotional. No, not that, never that. My gaze fell on the handle of Gerard's bottom right desk drawer. It was the one he'd always called his thinking drawer. Without conscious thought, I pulled it open. The scent that wafted out was potent, a wave of clean, sharp lavender that cut through the stale air of the room. It was the scent of my husband, the scent of his calm, his unshakable logic, his quiet strength. I took a deep breath, letting it fill my lungs. The grief was still there, a hot, heavy stone in my chest, but something else was forming around it. Something cold and hard and clear. Resolve. My first duty was not to my wounded heart. It was to my husband's memory. It was to the company we had built from nothing in the dusty basement of this very house. Betrayal of this magnitude was not just personal. It had a purpose, and I needed to understand its full scope. My eyes snapped back to the computer screen, to the locked folder. DTS Future, the future they were planning without me. My fingers moved to the keyboard. I opened a new browser window, the search bar blinking expectantly. I typed in Kendra's name, Kendra Shaw. Her public profiles bloomed across the screen, a curated collage of a young woman on the rise. Photos of her at charity galas on Julian's arm, photos of her at industry conferences, photos of her drinking cocktails on sun-drenched patios. It was all there, a public diary of her methodical climb into my son's life. I scrolled through months of posts, my mind a cold, efficient machine, looking for clues. A birthday post from a friend. September 12th. I tried her birthday as a password for the folder. Access denied. I kept digging. I found a gushing post from 6 months ago, a picture of a tiny, fluffy white dog. The caption read, "Meet my new baby Muffin. My life is complete." I tabbed back to the password prompt. I typed Muffin 123, access denied. I gritted my teeth. I tried another combination. Kendra Muffin, nothing. I thought about Julian, about his ego. Julian Kendra, nothing. It was almost insulting. Then I remembered a photo of them from what must have been their first anniversary, the date listed in the caption. October 24th, 2022. A date when he was supposedly on a business trip to Chicago. Another lie. I tried one last time, my fingers hovering over the keys. Her ridiculous dog, the year their secret life had begun. I typed, Muffin 2022. The password prompt vanished. A list of files appeared. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't a business plan. It wasn't a marketing strategy or a 5-year projection. It was a list of legal documents. My heart began to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. The first file was a PDF labeled Board Resolution Draft, MD. I clicked on it. The formal, dense language of corporate law filled the screen. I scanned the document, my eyes searching for the operative clauses. I found them. Hereby tenders her voluntary and irrevocable resignation from the Board of Directors, and expresses her utmost confidence in the new leadership of Mr. Julian Devereux. My blood ran cold. Voluntary resignation. They had drafted my surrender. I closed the file, my hand shaking slightly. The next one was titled Devereux Family Trust Amendment Act Final. I knew this document. I had signed the original with Gerard years ago, structuring our estate to pass the company to Julian, but only upon my death, with me as the lifetime trustee, the sole controlling shareholder. I opened the amendment. The new language was layered in pages of legalese, but the intent was brutally clear. It proposed the immediate transfer of my entire 51% controlling interest into a newly formed subtrust. My eyes jumped to the section defining the new trustees. The appointed sole and exclusive trustees of said subtrust shall be Mr. Julian Devereux and his spouse, Mrs. Kendra Shaw Devereux. They were trying to strip me of everything. The company I'd named. The legacy I'd built with my husband. Brick by painful brick. They were trying to steal my life's work while I was still living it. The final item in the folder was not a legal document. It was a saved email chain. The subject line was chillingly simple. Finalizing the plan. I clicked it open. The first email was from Kendra to Julian. Her words glowed on the screen, a testament to her venomous ambition. Heard back from the lawyers. They said the language on the trust amendment is perfect. Legally airtight. They recommend we present it to her the day we get back. She'll be so swept up in our happy news and the big welcome home party she's bound to throw that she won't even read past the first page. We just need to get her signature on it before she has a chance to talk to Arthur or anyone else. I saw Julian's reply beneath it, sent from his phone just hours before they'd left for the airport. It was 4 words. 4 words that extinguished the last flicker of maternal love in my heart and sealed his fate. Good. Get it done quickly. I leaned back in Gerard's chair, the scent of lavender seeming to mock me. The betrayal was no longer a mystery. It had a name. It was a corporate coup. It wasn't just that they'd left me behind. It wasn't just that my son had married a stranger in secret. It was all a means to an end. The wedding, the family trip, the lies, they were all just steps in a cold, calculated plan to wrestle my husband's legacy from my hands and leave me with nothing. I closed the laptop with a quiet, decisive click. The words on the screen had burned themselves onto the back of my eyelids. Get it done quickly. My son's words. My own child, plotting to dispossess me, to render me a powerless figurehead in the company Gerard and I had bled for. They weren't just trying to sideline me. They were trying to erase me. Erase my history, my contribution, my authority. They wanted to turn me into a relic in my own home. A smiling, dotty old mother who would sign away her life's work without a second thought, blinded by the flash of a wedding ring. The pain of that realization was a physical thing. It was a cold, heavy weight pressing down on my chest, making each breath a conscious effort. For a moment, I felt the terrifying pull of despair, the urge to curl up in Gerard's chair and let the grief consume me. It would have been so easy. To become what they thought I already was, old, tired, and defeated. But then I looked around the study. I saw the framed photograph on the desk of Gerard and me, taken the day we signed the papers to incorporate Devereux Transit Solutions. We were so young, our faces alight with a mixture of terror and exhilarating hope. I saw the worn spot on the carpet where he used to pace while on the phone, wrestling with payrolls we could barely meet and contracts that seemed impossibly large. This room was a testament to our shared struggle, our shared dream. This company was not just an asset. It was the story of our life together. And I would not let my son and his grasping, ambitious bride tear out the final pages. My fear, sharp and metallic in my mouth, began to recede, replaced by a cold, clear focus. I could not fight this alone. Julian had lawyers, the same firm our family had used for years. They had drafted these documents. They were complicit, or at the very least, they were following the instructions of the man they now saw as the head of the company. I was isolated, an island of one. To fight them head-on, to challenge the legality of their documents, would be a long, ugly war of attrition in a courtroom, a war they were prepared for, and I was not. I needed an ally, not a lawyer, not yet. I needed someone who knew the company from its bones, someone who understood that its true value wasn't in the balance sheets, but in its soul, someone whose loyalty was not to Julian, the new king, but to Gerard, the founder. There was only one name: Arthur Coleman. Arthur had been our first hire. An accountant just a few years younger than Gerard, with a mind as sharp as a tack and an integrity as solid as bedrock. He'd been with us through every storm, every expansion, every crisis. He'd officially retired 2 years ago, but he still came in 1 day a week, mostly, he said, to make sure Julian wasn't running the place into the ground with his fancy new software. Gerard had trusted him completely, and so did I. I picked up my phone, my fingers steady. I scrolled to his name and pressed the call button. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm and familiar. "Margot, what a pleasant surprise. I thought you'd be off soaking up the Maldivian sun with the rest of them." "I decided to stay home, Arthur. My garden needed me," I said, my voice even, betraying nothing. "I was hoping I could trouble you for a coffee. There's something I'd like to discuss." "Of course. Is everything all right?" The warmth in his voice was now tinged with concern. He knew me too well. "Everything will be," I said. "Can you meet me in an hour? The little bakery on Elm Street? The one with the terrible coffee?" It was a place we both knew was far from the orbit of the business district, a place no one from the office would ever frequent. "I'll be there," he said. No more questions asked. I printed everything: the wedding photo, the draft resolutions, the trust amendment, the emails. I put them in a plain manila envelope and drove to the bakery, feeling like a spy in my own life. Arthur was already there, sitting at a small table in the back corner, a cup of what was surely dreadful coffee in front of him. His kind, wrinkled face broke into a smile when he saw me, but it faltered as I sat down. He must have seen the strain in my eyes, the tightness around my mouth. "Margot, what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." I didn't say a word. I simply pushed the manila envelope across the table. He looked at me, then at the envelope, a question in his eyes. I gave him a small, tight nod. He opened the clasp and slid the papers out. He saw the photograph first. His eyebrows shot up, his mouth parting in a silent "oh." He stared at the smiling faces of my son and Kendra, then at the beaming guests in the background. He looked back at me, his expression one of profound confusion. "I didn't realize. I had no idea they were even serious," he murmured. "Neither did I said quietly. "Keep reading." He picked up the legal documents. I watched his face as he read. I saw the confusion melt away, replaced by a dawning horror. His kind, grandfatherly features hardened, the lines around his eyes deepening. His gaze flickered from the pages to my face and back again. He read the emails between Julian and Kendra twice, his lips a thin, hard line. When he finally looked up, the warmth in his eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, protective fury. "The ungrateful, treacherous little—" He stopped himself, shaking his head in disgust. "To do this to you, to his own mother, after everything you and Gerard did for him." He wasn't surprised. That was the thing that struck me. He was disgusted, he was furious on my behalf, but he was not entirely surprised. "You knew something was wrong," I stated. It wasn't a question. He sighed, running a hand over his bald head. "I've seen things, Margot. Julian's spending, it's been reckless. Trips, a new car, that condo he bought for Kendra. The company can support a comfortable lifestyle, but he's living like a king. And her, that woman has been whispering in his ear for months, filling his head with talk of being a modern CEO, of needing to be decisive and cut away the old wood. He gestured to the papers. I just never imagined the old wood he wanted to cut away was you. His words were a balm. He saw it. He understood. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't a hysterical old woman. I was a woman under attack. His belief, his immediate and unquestioning loyalty, felt like a steel rod being inserted into my spine. Gerard would never let them do this to you, Margot, Arthur said, his voice low and fierce. He reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. So, we won't either. A surge of strength, pure and potent, flooded through me. We. It was no longer just me. It was we. They have lawyers, Arthur. They've been planning this for months. Every word in those documents is designed to be, as she put it, legally airtight. Maybe, he said, a glint in his eye I hadn't seen in years. It was the look he used to get when he'd found a clever way to save us on our taxes. But they're arrogant, and arrogance makes people sloppy. They're so focused on their shiny new legal traps that they've likely forgotten about the foundation everything is built on. Let's go back to the beginning. We left the bakery and drove to my house. Back in Gerard's study, the room felt different now. It wasn't a tomb anymore. It was a war room. Arthur logged into the company server, his fingers flying across the keyboard with a speed that belied his age. He didn't go to the folder Julian had created. He went deep into the archives, to the digital copies of the company's founding documents. The corporate charter, he mumbled, his eyes scanning the screen. The bylaws, the things nobody has looked at in 30 years. He pulled up the original charter, the document Gerard and I had signed with our young lawyer all those decades ago. It was dry, dense reading. We spent nearly an hour poring over the articles, the clauses, the amendments. My hope began to wane. It all seemed standard. And then Arthur stopped. He leaned closer to the screen, his finger tracing a line of text. "My God," he whispered. "Gerard, you clever, clever man." "What is it?" I asked, leaning in beside him. He pointed to a small, unassuming clause in Article 4, Section 3. It was titled, Extraordinary Corporate Actions. I read the words aloud, my voice barely a whisper. In the event of a proposed merger, acquisition or sale of substantially all of the company's assets, final approval authority is vested solely and unilaterally in the founding majority shareholder of record as of January 1st, 1985. Arthur looked at me, his face split by a triumphant grin. "There is only one person on this earth who fits that description, Margot." The air crackled. The clause was a fail-safe, a hidden power, written into the company's DNA by my husband, a man who always planned for every contingency. A power designed to protect his legacy, to be wielded by the one person he trusted above all others. A power that Julian, in his arrogant rush to seize control, had completely forgotten. Or, more likely, had never even known existed. I had the sole unilateral authority to sell the entire company right out from under him. I stared at the words on the screen, at that single, elegant sentence my husband had penned 30 years ago. It felt as though Gerard himself were in the room, laying a reassuring hand on my shoulder. It was a key he had left for me, tucked away in the very foundations of our life's work. The power to save the company was, and had always been, mine alone. A quiet, profound sense of calm washed over me. The fear was gone. The shock was gone. The grief, while still present, was no longer a crippling weight, but a clarifying fire. I knew what I had to do. Arthur and I sat in silence for a long moment, the gravity of the discovery settling between us. He was the one who finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "This changes everything, Margot. This isn't just a shield, it's a sword." I nodded slowly, my mind already turning, the pieces of a new, terrible calculus beginning to form. They thought I was a pawn in their game. They were about to find out I was the one who owned the board. The first call from Julian came the next morning. I was in the garden, snipping the dead heads off the roses, when my phone buzzed in my apron pocket. I saw his name flash on the screen, accompanied by a picture of him as a teenager, grinning with a mouthful of braces. My thumb hovered over the ignore button, but I forced myself to answer. I had to play my part. Julian, darling, how is paradise? I made my voice sound bright, a little frail, the perfect picture of a mother delighted to hear from her son. It's incredible, Mom. You really should have come, he said. His tone was cheerful, but there was a new, brittle edge to it. The easy confidence was gone, replaced by something impatient. The weather is perfect. Kendra sends her love. We're having the time of our lives. There was no mention of a wedding, no hint of the life-altering event that had taken place. He was maintaining the lie. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. That's wonderful, dear. I'm so glad you're all having a well-deserved rest, I said, my voice dripping with the maternal warmth he expected. About that, he said, his tone shifting almost imperceptibly from casual to business. Rest is good, but Kendra and I have been doing some incredible blue sky thinking out here. We've got some big plans for the company when we get back. Really big. We're talking about streamlining, modernizing everything, taking DTS to the next level. Streamlining, modernizing, the same coded language Kendra had used in her emails. It meant getting rid of me. That sounds ambitious, Julian, I said, keeping my voice level. It is. And that's why we need to make sure everything is structured properly for the future, he continued, the words coming a little too fast. Listen, our lawyers drew up some papers. Just some simple estate planning updates, really. It's all about securing your future, Mom. Making sure you're taken care of without having to worry about the day-to-day. It'll lessen your burden. Lessen my burden. The phrase hung in the air between us, a piece of poisoned fruit offered with a smile. He was reading directly from their script. I could almost hear Kendra whispering the lines in his ear. Well, we can certainly look at them when you're back, dear, I said breezily. No need to think about work while you're on vacation. There was a pause. I could feel his frustration crackling down the line, thousands of miles away. This wasn't going as quickly as he'd hoped. Right. Of course, he said, his cheerfulness sounding forced. Anyway, I'll call you tomorrow. Love you, Mom. I love you too, Julian, I said, and the lie tasted like ash in my mouth. He called every day after that. Each conversation followed the same pattern. A few pleasantries about the weather in the Maldives, a hollow inquiry about my well-being, and then the pivot. He talked about legacy, about the need for a new generation of leadership. He painted a picture of me, sipping iced tea on my sun porch, blissfully unburdened by the complexities of modern logistics, while he and his brilliant new wife steered the ship into a glorious future. It was a masterpiece of condescension, a slow, methodical attempt to infantilize me, to make me feel like a fragile heirloom that needed to be packed away for safekeeping. On the third day, he put Kendra on the phone. Her voice was a confection of sweetness and light. Margot, I hope we're not bothering you. We just miss you so much. It's lovely to hear your voice, Kendra, I said, my own voice a perfect mimicry of politeness. I just wanted to say, I am so excited to really and truly become a part of this family, she gushed. I feel like you're the mother I never had, and I want to do everything I can to honor you and Gerard's legacy. These new arrangements Julian has been talking about, they're really all about that. Ensuring the Devereaux name means something for generations to come. It's about protecting you. The gaslighting was so thick I felt like I was choking on it. To hear this woman, this predator who had plotted in secret to steal my company, speak of honoring me, of protecting me, it was a violation. Every syrupy word was a sharpened knife, twisted with a gentle smile. I let her talk, murmuring vague affirmations, playing the part of the slightly confused but ultimately agreeable matriarch. I needed them to believe their plan was working. I needed them to walk confidently into the trap. The final straw came not as a phone call, but as an email. It wasn't from Julian, but from his lawyer, a man whose firm Gerard and I had enriched for over 30 years. The subject line was, Devereaux Family Trust Finalization. My hands were trembling as I opened it. The body of the email was brief and formal. Dear Mrs. Devereaux, Per Julian's instructions, please find attached the updated trust and board resolution documents for your review. We have structured these to maximize tax efficiency and streamline governance going forward. We would advise a swift signature upon Mr. Devereux's return to Charlotte in order to finalize the new family trust without delay. Sincerely, Robert Prescott. And there they were. Attached to the email were the very same PDFs I had discovered in the hidden folder. The roadmap of my own destruction, delivered to my inbox as a benevolent gift. I clicked open the trust amendment. I scrolled through the dense legalese, the same clauses that would transfer my controlling shares, the same lines that appointed Julian and Kendra as the sole trustees. It was all there. Seeing it presented to me like this, so openly, so brazenly, was different. This was not a secret plan anymore. It was an active assault. They were coming for me, armed with lawyers and lies and the saccharine poison of their concern. Any lingering flicker of sentiment, any residual shred of maternal mercy that might have survived the initial discovery was extinguished in that moment. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misguided attempt by my son to prove himself. It was a cold-blooded, premeditated attack on my life and my husband's legacy. They didn't just want the company. They wanted me to hand it to them. They wanted my signature, my blessing on their theft. I looked from the lawyer's email to the framed photo of Gerard on the desk. His eyes, so kind and clear, seemed to meet mine. The time for observation was over. The time for silent investigation was done. They had made their move. Now it was my turn to act. I closed the email from Robert Prescott and pushed back from Gerard's desk. The house was quiet. My heart was not. It beat with a slow, steady rhythm, a war drum sounding a call to arms. They had pushed me into a corner, believing I had nowhere left to go. But they were wrong. They had forgotten about the weapon Gerard had left me. And now I was going to use it. My first call was to Arthur. He picked up immediately. "They sent the papers," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "From Prescott, asking for a swift signature." I heard Arthur take a sharp breath. The absolute audacity. "Audacity is a gift, Arthur. It makes people careless," I replied. "The time for waiting is over. I need you. I'm on my way." When he arrived 20 minutes later, I had 2 cups of coffee waiting in the study. The room was no longer just a war room. It was my headquarters. I felt a clarity I hadn't known in years. The fog of grief and trust had been burned away, leaving only the sharp, clean lines of strategy. "They want to erase me, Arthur," I said, looking him directly in the eye. "They want to turn Devereux Transit Solutions into their personal kingdom, built on a foundation of lies. Gerard's legacy of integrity, of treating our people like family. They'll burn it all for a new car and a bigger house." "So we fight them," he said, his jaw set. "No," I said softly. "Fighting implies a struggle, a war. That gives them power. It validates their position. We are not going to fight them. We are going to liquidate them." Arthur looked at me, his eyes wide. I laid out the plan. It was audacious, as I'd told him. It was also brutally simple. It used their own momentum, their own arrogance, against them. The power Gerard had left me was absolute. I didn't need the board's approval. I didn't need Julian's consent. I just needed a buyer. "There's only one real choice," Arthur said, his mind already working. "Someone with the capital, the infrastructure, and the ethics to make it a clean transition. Someone who won't gut the place for parts." We said the name at the same time. Sterling Rhodes. Dr. Sterling Rhodes was the CEO of Summit Cargo Group, our largest and most respected competitor. He was a good man, an old-school businessman who, like Gerard, had built his company from the ground up. Over the years, he and Gerard had been fierce rivals in the marketplace, but had shared a mutual, grudging respect. Sterling had approached us twice about a merger after Gerard passed, but Julian had always arrogantly dismissed the idea, seeing it as an admission of weakness. I, on the other hand, had always kept the door open. "Can you get him on the phone, Arthur? Discreetly?" I asked. "Not from the office. A personal call. I need a meeting. As soon as possible." Arthur nodded, pulling out his cell phone and walking into the adjoining library. I sat at Gerard's desk, the scent of lavender a comforting presence. I was not destroying my husband's legacy. I was protecting it from a blight, a merger with a respectable company, a guarantee that our employees would be cared for. That was 1,000 times better than letting the company's soul be corrupted from the inside out by my son and his greedy bride. Arthur returned a few minutes later. He'll meet you for breakfast, tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, at the Capitol Club. The next morning, I dressed with purpose. I chose a simple, elegant navy blue dress and the string of pearls Gerard had given me for our 30th anniversary. I looked in the hall mirror before I left, not at my face, but at my posture. I stood up straight, my shoulders back. I was Margot Devereaux, co-founder of Devereaux Transit Solutions, and I was not to be trifled with. Sterling Rhodes was a tall, imposing man with kind eyes and a firm handshake. He was shocked to see me, but quickly masked it with professional courtesy. He expressed his condolences for my family's absence. "I was surprised you didn't join them," he said, as the waiter poured our coffee. "I had some pressing business here at home," I replied calmly. I opened my briefcase and took out the manila envelope. I didn't show him the wedding photo or the emails. That was family business, however ugly. I showed him the legal documents, the draft of my resignation, the amendment to the trust. I wanted him to understand the nature of the threat, not just to me, but to the stability of the company he was considering acquiring. He read them in stunned silence. When he looked up, his face was a mask of cold fury. "This is unconscionable. It is a coup, Sterling," I said simply. "And it will not succeed. I am exercising a provision in my company's charter. I am offering you a complete buyout of Devereaux Transit Solutions, my entire 51% controlling interest, and I will personally broker the sale of the remaining minority shares held by my family members who are currently unavailable for comment." His eyes widened. He knew what an opportunity this was. "My price is fair," I continued, "but my conditions are not negotiable. First, this must remain absolutely secret until the moment I choose to reveal it. Your lawyers will work with my personal counsel, not the corporate firm. No one at DTS is to know. No one. Second, every Devereaux employee, from the drivers to the executive staff, with two notable exceptions, must be retained by Summit Cargo Group, with their full seniority, salary, and benefits guaranteed for a minimum of 5 years. I was selling the company, but I would not sell out my people. They were the true legacy. Sterling looked at me, a deep respect dawning in his eyes. He didn't hesitate. "Margot, you have my word, and you have a deal." While the lawyers worked in the background, drafting the sale agreements with the speed and silence of sharks, I began the second phase of my plan, playing my part. When Julian called that evening, I didn't wait for him to bring up the papers. I beat him to it. My voice was a trembling performance of joy and surprise. "Julian, darling, I've just seen the most incredible photo on the internet, from your cousin's daughter, a wedding." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. He was completely thrown off script. "Mom, I can explain," he stammered. "Explain? Don't be silly. It's the most wonderful news," I gushed, injecting a theatrical sob into my voice. "My son is married. Oh, I am so sorry I wasn't there. I feel just awful, but I am so happy for you both. For all of us. Kendra is a lovely girl." He was speechless. I could hear Kendra whispering frantically in the background. "We have to celebrate," I plowed ahead, not giving him an inch to recover. "When you get back, we are throwing you the biggest party this city has ever seen. A proper welcome home and a wedding celebration. We'll host it at the country club, in the grand ballroom. We'll invite everyone, the whole board, all our biggest clients, the mayor. Everyone needs to meet the new Mrs. Devereaux." The bait was perfect. It was everything they craved: public validation, social triumph, a formal coronation. To them, this wasn't just a party. It was the public passing of the torch. It was the moment the city would see them as the new power couple at the helm of the Devereaux dynasty. "Wow, Mom, that's amazing," Julian said, his voice thick with relief and a poorly concealed surge of ego. "We'd love that." "It's the least I can do," I said, my voice sweet as honey. "You just relax and enjoy the rest of your honeymoon. Your mother will take care of everything." As I hung up the phone, a cold, grim smile touched my lips. The contracts were being drawn up. The invitations would go out in the morning. The stage was being set. They thought they were coming home to a coronation. They were coming home to an execution. I stepped out of the car and handed the keys to the valet. The grand entrance to the Charlotte Country Club was bathed in warm light, a steady stream of the city's most influential citizens flowing through its doors. I could hear the gentle hum of conversation and the distant strains of a string quartet from the ballroom. My hands were perfectly steady. My heart was a block of ice in my chest. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind 100 times. I was ready. As I entered the foyer, the party was already in full swing. The grand ballroom was a glittering sea of champagne flutes and designer dresses. I saw the mayor shaking hands with the president of the city's largest bank. I saw board members from 6 major corporations, all of them here to celebrate my son. Or so they thought. My eyes found them immediately. Julian and Kendra stood near the center of the room, holding court. They were radiant, a king and queen surveying their new domain. Julian, in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, looked taller, more confident than I had ever seen him. He laughed, a booming, artificial sound, as he clapped a city councilman on the back. And Kendra. She was a vision in a sleek emerald green dress that must have cost a fortune. Diamonds glittered at her throat and on her ears, her smile a dazzling, predatory thing. They moved through the crowd with an easy, practiced grace, accepting congratulations, basking in the glow of what they believed was their ascension. I watched them for a long moment, a ghost at my own party. I saw my sister, Eleanor, and my brother-in-law, Henry, hovering near them, their faces flushed with pride and free champagne. They had returned from their vacation full of apologies for not telling me sooner, but their excuses were flimsy, their eyes shifty. They had been swept up in the glamour and the generosity, and had chosen to believe the easy lie over the inconvenient truth. They too would learn their lesson tonight. I began to move through the room, a small, serene smile fixed on my face. People greeted me with warmth and sympathy. "What a wonderful surprise, Margot. You must be so proud. Kendra is just lovely." I accepted their words with grace, playing the part of the magnanimous, slightly blindsided matriarch to perfection. I let Julian and Kendra have their moment. The higher they climbed tonight, the further they would have to fall. As the evening wore on, I saw Julian's eyes flick towards me more and more often. He was getting impatient. This party was for him, but the real transfer of power, the real coronation, wouldn't happen until his mother officially passed the torch. Finally, he approached me, Kendra clinging to his arm. "Mom, it's a wonderful party," he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Everyone is here." "Of course, darling. This is a momentous occasion," I replied, my voice smooth as silk. "People are expecting a speech," Kendra chimed in, her voice a purr. "A toast to the future." "You're right," I said, looking at them both. "It's time." A hush fell over the room as I made my way to the small stage at the front where the quartet had been playing. The band leader handed me a microphone. Hundreds of faces turned towards me, expectant and smiling. I saw Julian and Kendra position themselves at the foot of the stage, their faces preening, ready to receive their accolades. On the far side of the room, near a service entrance, I caught Arthur's eye. He gave me a slow, almost imperceptible nod. Everything was in place. I tapped the microphone, the soft sound echoing through the suddenly silent ballroom. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice clear and steady. "Thank you all so much for coming tonight to celebrate with my family. It means the world to me to look out and see so many dear friends, so many respected colleagues." I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the room. Many of you know that my late husband Gerard and I started Devereaux Transit Solutions over 35 years ago with little more than a single truck and a shared dream. We built it on a foundation of simple principles: hard work, integrity, and treating our people like family. That was our legacy. I looked down at Julian and Kendra. They were beaming, soaking in the praise they believed was a prelude to their own. Legacy, I continued, my voice taking on a more contemplative tone, is a vital thing. It's a torch, passed from one generation to the next. And as we look to the future, as we embrace a new generation of leadership, our most important duty is to protect that legacy, to ensure that the flame Gerard lit is never, ever extinguished by greed or arrogance. A flicker of confusion crossed Julian's face. Kendra's smile tightened just a fraction. This was not the speech they had been expecting. And it is in that spirit of securing our legacy, I said, my voice rising with a new, sharp authority, that I have an exciting announcement to make about the future of Devereaux Transit Solutions. I turned my head and gestured to the grand entrance of the ballroom. As if on cue, the doors opened, and Dr. Sterling Rhodes walked in. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sterling Rhodes, the CEO of their biggest competitor, at a Devereaux family party? It made no sense. I saw Julian's jaw go slack, his eyes darting from Sterling to me, a dawning horror on his face. Kendra went pale beneath her expensive makeup. I smiled, a serene, final smile, and turned back to the microphone. To ensure that our company and, most importantly, our people are protected for decades to come, I have exercised my authority as the founding majority shareholder to approve a merger. I let the word hang in the air for a beat, the silence in the room now absolute, suffocating. As of 9 o'clock this morning, Devereaux Transit Solutions is now a fully owned and integrated subsidiary of Summit Cargo Group. An audible gasp filled the ballroom. It was a collective, unified sound of pure shock. Julian looked as if he'd been struck by lightning, his face a grotesque mask of disbelief and incandescent fury. Kendra looked like she was going to be physically sick, but I wasn't finished. Before Julian could find his voice, before anyone could react, I delivered the final blow. As my final act as CEO, and to honor the way my husband always did business, a significant portion of the sales proceeds have been placed into a new charitable foundation in his name. Furthermore, generous severance and bonus checks have been prepared for all of our loyal employees. I gestured to the side of the room, where Arthur now stood beside a small table. On it was a heavy cardboard box filled with envelopes. My eyes found Julian's. There was no love there, no pity, just the cold, clean finality of a door slamming shut. I raised my champagne flute. "Please join me," I said, my voice ringing through the stunned silence, "in toasting the future." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The entire ballroom seemed frozen in a tableau of shock. Champagne glasses held halfway to lips, mouths agape. Then, the spell shattered. The silence was replaced by a roar of excited, scandalized whispers. Every eye in the room was fixed on Julian and Kendra, no longer as the guests of honor, but as the centerpiece of a spectacular public execution. Julian was the first to react. He shoved his way through the stunned onlookers, his face a terrifying mix of white-hot rage and sheer panic. He stormed the stage, grabbing my arm. His fingers dug into my flesh like talons. "What have you done?" he hissed, his voice a furious, choked whisper that was for my ears alone. "You senile old fool, what have you done?" I didn't flinch. I didn't pull away. I simply looked at him. Not with anger, not with hatred, but with a profound and bottomless emptiness. I looked at this stranger wearing my son's face, and I felt nothing at all. I looked straight through him, as if he were a pane of glass, and my gaze settled on Arthur, who had already begun to move towards the stage, his expression thunderous. My silence, my utter refusal to engage, seemed to enrage Julian more than any shouted words could have. He saw it then. His complete and total powerlessness. He had no leverage, no argument, no position from which to fight. He had been utterly and completely outmaneuvered. He let go of my arm as if he'd been burned and stumbled back a step. Kendra, who had been frozen in place, finally unfroze. But there was no fight in her. Only terror. Her carefully constructed mask of socialite grace had crumbled, revealing the desperate, grasping creature beneath. Her eyes, wide with panic, darted around the room, seeing not friends and admirers, but judges and executioners. The people who had been fawning over her moments before were now staring with a mixture of pity and contempt. They were turning away, physically turning their backs on her, forming new conversational circles that pointedly excluded the disgraced couple. They were pariahs, instantly. The verdict of Charlotte society was swift and merciless. Sterling Rhodes, ever the professional, stepped up to the microphone I had abandoned. His calm, authoritative voice cut through the chaos. He spoke of a new era of cooperation, of respecting the Devereux legacy, of his honor in being entrusted with its future. He was a shark, and he was calming the waters now that the blood had been spilled. Julian and Kendra didn't stay to listen. They fled. They didn't say goodbye to anyone. They simply pushed their way through the throng of whispering guests, a toxic cloud of shame and humiliation clearing a path for them. I watched them go, my son and his bride, disappearing through the grand doors and into the darkness. They had entered the party as royalty. They left as ghosts. The days that followed were a cascade of consequences, each one a direct result of the bomb I had detonated. The news of the merger and the scandalous story behind it was the only thing anyone in the Charlotte business community talked about. Arthur kept me informed of the fallout, his voice a mixture of grim satisfaction and professional duty. The first and most immediate problem for Julian was the creditors. As Arthur had suspected, my son was leveraged to the hilt. He had taken out massive personal loans, using his future inheritance and his position as CEO of a profitable company as collateral. He had been betting the farm on his coup, assuming that once he had control of the company's assets, he could easily cover his debts. The morning after the party, with the news of the sale plastered across the business journal, his world collapsed. The promise of the Devereux fortune was gone. His position was gone. The calls began immediately. The banks, the private lenders, the credit card companies, they all wanted their money. Now. Within a week, the for sale sign went up in front of the absurdly large, sterile glass house he and Kendra had been living in. A week after that, his gleaming German sports car was repossessed from the driveway. They were being liquidated, just as I had planned. Their lifestyle, a glittering facade built on debt and deceit, was being dismantled piece by painful piece. Their social ruin was even more complete. Kendra, who had fought so desperately to claw her way into the city's elite inner circle, was unceremoniously cast out. Invitations to charity galas were rescinded. Her lunch dates canceled without explanation. The women she had tried so hard to emulate now looked right through her when they passed her on the street. She had craved status above all else, and her punishment was to be rendered utterly invisible. Julian became a professional disgrace. In the close-knit logistics industry his father had helped build, his name was Mud. No one would hire the man who had tried to steal his own mother's company. He was unemployable, a walking cautionary tale about greed and betrayal. Through it all, I remained silent. I didn't take their calls. My sister and brother-in-law, mortified and deeply ashamed, came to my house to offer a groveling apology. I accepted it with a cool nod. I didn't have the energy for recrimination. I simply told them that their judgment had been poor and that it would take a long time to rebuild my trust. There were no more family dinners. The silence in my house returned, but this time it was a clean, unburdened quiet. About a month after the party, Arthur came to me with the final paperwork from the sale. Everything was settled. The foundation was funded. The employees were secure in their new roles at Summit Cargo Group. My own finances were more than secure for the rest of my days. There was only one loose end left to tie up. I called my personal lawyer, a woman I had hired the day after I first met with Sterling Rhodes. She was sharp, discreet, and had no connection to my family's old firm. I gave her my final instructions. There was no screaming match with Julian. There was no final, tearful confrontation. My betrayal had been announced with a microphone and 100 witnesses. My response would be delivered with the cold, quiet finality of the law. 2 days later, a courier delivered a thick envelope to the rental apartment Julian and Kendra had been forced to move into. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a formal notice of disinheritance, legally severing Julian from my personal will and estate. Every penny, every piece of property, every stock and bond that I owned personally would now go to the Gerard Devereux Charitable Foundation upon my death. He would not get another dime. The second document was a restraining order, legally preventing him or Kendra from contacting me, coming to my home, or approaching my place of business. It was a clean, brutal, and irreversible severing. That, I realized, was the dividend of their betrayal. Not just the loss of a company or money or status. They had gambled everything on their greed, and they had lost it all. They had no company, no money, no social standing, and now they had no family. They had locked the door from the outside, and I had simply, quietly, thrown away the key. 1 year later, I am sitting at a long, polished oak table, the afternoon sun streaming through the tall windows of the downtown library's historical wing. Before me are grant proposals. One is for a program that provides laptops and internet access to children in low-income neighborhoods. Another is for a mobile health clinic to serve the city's elderly population. This is a board meeting for the Gerard Devereux Charitable Foundation. This is my new work. My life is quieter now. The grand, echoing silence of my house is no longer a temporary reprieve, but a permanent state of being. It is a peaceful silence, filled not with absence, but with possibility. The days are my own. I spend them in the garden, my hands in the soil. I spend them here, with Arthur, who sits across the table from me, poring over a financial report with the same fierce attention he once gave to freight contracts. We are a good team. We always were. My true family, I've learned, is not always the one you are born into, but the one you cultivate. It's Arthur and his wife, who have dinner with me every Friday. It's my former secretary, Maria, who emails me photos of her new grandson, a beautiful baby boy with cheeks so round they look like ripe peaches. She tells me that working for Summit Cargo Group is good, that Dr. Rhodes kept his word, that everyone feels secure. Her words are a balm to a wound I didn't know was still tender. My sister Eleanor and I have started having lunch once a month. It is hesitant still, but it is real. The shame has faded from her eyes, replaced by a quiet respect. She sees me now not as her older sister, but as a woman she is only just beginning to understand. I rarely think of Julian. The restraining order was never challenged. The notice of disinheritance was never contested. I heard through a distant cousin that he and Kendra sold what little they had left and moved somewhere out west. Arizona, I think. The cousin said Julian was working for a car rental company at the airport. I felt nothing when I heard it. Not joy, not pity, not even the ghost of a mother's pain. It was like hearing a piece of news about a stranger I once knew a long, long time ago. The relentless, cloying need for his approval, the ache to see his father's best qualities reflected in him, that has been surgically removed from my heart. Its absence has left me with a profound sense of freedom. I am not just Julian's mother anymore. I am simply Margot, and that is more than enough. This evening, after the board meeting, I find myself back in Gerard's study. The room is the same, yet entirely different. The old ghosts have departed, leaving behind only a gentle, lingering warmth. The air is still thick with the clean scent of lavender from the sachets in his desk drawers. I pull one open, inhaling deeply. It is no longer the scent of grief, a painful reminder of all I had lost. It is no longer the scent of battle, a catalyst for cold resolve. Now, it is just the scent of peace, the scent of integrity, preserved and protected. I walk to the window and look out at my garden. The last of the summer roses are in bloom, their deep red petals a testament to their resilience. I used to think Gerard's legacy was the name on the side of 1,000 trucks, the impressive balance sheets, the company that bore our name. I thought that in selling it, I had been forced to destroy that legacy in order to save my own soul. I see now that I was wrong. Legacy isn't a name on a building. It's not a number in a bank account. It's the values you live by, the respect you earn from the people whose lives you touch. It's the quiet integrity that guides you when no one is watching. Julian and Kendra thought the legacy was the company, the money, the status. They were willing to corrupt its very soul to possess the empty shell. I hadn't destroyed Gerard's legacy. I had saved it. I had saved it from those who would have turned his good name into a monument to their own greed. I had transformed it from a thing of steel and commerce into a living, breathing force for good that would touch lives in this city for years to come, long after we were all gone. A soft, genuine smile touches my lips, the first truly unburdened smile in what feels like a lifetime. The war is over. The accounts are settled. I take a slow, deep breath, the lavender-scented air filling my lungs. The dividend had been paid in full. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you've enjoyed this journey, I would be so grateful if you would like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. Please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. I truly love hearing from you. I hope you have a peaceful day wherever you are in the world.